Recording. All right. So let's go on. Now we're going to talk about, now that we've got the bad news and a little bit about requirements of what you have to do to succeed in the job market, today's job market. We're going to continue that and get into more what you can do to adapt how you manage your career. So there's several things that you may end up doing. First, you may discover that everybody who's unemployed and others of us may end up having to do a career transition. Careers are not linear anymore. They used to be somewhat of a linear. You came in as a junior engineer and you become an engineer, and you might become a senior engineer and go through this progression, but this is not necessarily the case anymore. And what you may find is you get into this situation where you get laid off, or you leave and you go out to look for another job, and you discover that you're going to have make what we call a career shift. And what does that mean? That means that depending on how long it's been since you graduated, since you got your degree, depending if the industry has changed. So are you working for a company that was doing a certain level of technology, and now you go out in the job market and you discover, well, they may not have been at quite the leading edge because maybe they were conservative, and now you go out and you look and all the companies want is all the leading edge. So that could be a change, or technology change. And another thing, even though it's against the law, age and especially your currency of your skills is going to be a factor. So now people the age discrimination is against the law, so you don't have any age discrimination anymore. What you have is only want 5 to 7 years experience. So how old do you have to be to have 5 to 7 years experience? We don't want anybody with 10 to 15 years of experience. We only want people with 5 to 7 years of experience. But we're not discriminating. We're asking for specific experience. Anyway, it's enough editorial. So, transition. This is a transition timeline. So, those of you who've gotten unemployed or laid off, so you start with things are going along, and all of a sudden you get laid off, or it looks like things are going to be laid off. Things are happening, things don't look good. So you go down here and you get laid off. And if it's been really miserable going to work because of all of this uncertainty, you'll say, it's over with. I don't have to go back there anymore. But then you look around and, gee, I only want 5 years experience. I don't know what I'm going to do. Let me get down here in the valley of failure, or the valley of despair, rejection. So the key thing is don't get stuck down here. It's hard not to get stuck down here, but don't get stuck down there. So how do you do? Well, you start doing some networking. You build your network. You go out and you get some ideas from people. Get some increased self-confidence. Make some plans. You get a job, you get a new job, and there you are. You're all set again until it starts over again. Okay, so basically you have this sort of career roller coaster. So the key thing is don't get stuck down here in the valley of despair. Anyway, so what are things that influence how you adapt? Well, you've got what we call factors. So you've got external factors, outsourcing, cheap foreign labor, declining profits, the economy, health costs, things like that. So these are all external factors. And there is an unfortunate factor here, a quote from John Challenger: in a woeful cycle, long-term employment begets long-term unemployment. So basically that means the longer you are out of work, the harder it is to find work. It's not you can't, and if you're in one of those situations, then you need to start thinking about the idea of a career shift. Gee, I was doing this, maybe I really can't do that anymore. Maybe I need to look at something else I can do. There's a story a friend of mine tells about a guy he was counseling in Massachusetts who was, he was a gallium arsenide designer. He really liked being a gallium arsenide designer, but this is back in the, I don't know, the 80s or whatever, when gallium arsenide, the project got shut down. And he was looking for a job, and I really want to be a gallium arsenide designer. And he couldn't find a job, and he couldn't find a job, and this guy kept working with him and working with him and working with him. Finally got him convinced that, well, gee, maybe he couldn't be a gallium arsenide designer. Maybe he had to look at doing something else. And then, then he was able to go off and get his next job. But you've got to know when to fold them, basically. In addition to the external factors, you've got personal factors. So you've got a mortgage, you've got children in college, you've got ties to where you're living, you've got, you don't feel very good, you're unemployed, you're ashamed, you've got talents. If you're taking a long time to find a job, what happens if I pick this and it doesn't work? Then I've got to start over again. I don't want to start over again. So you have all these factors. So, and if you're in a transition, this material comes from Henry Gregor. Henry Gregor was a marketing guy, and he got laid off with a bunch of us in the dot-com bust. And we had a displaced worker program, and there's a whole bunch of we go, and there's a room full of 50 people twice a week. And people would go up and they would start complaining, nobody's giving me a job. Nobody will give me a job. And finally Henry couldn't stand it anymore, and he said, nobody's going to give you a job. You have to sell yourself, you have to market yourself to the company. And everybody went, because we're not trained to do that. We haven't been trained to do that. So he came up with a whole curriculum. I think it's still on the web. There's a link in the material about lots of things to do this. So I borrowed with permission some of the material here from him. So if you're looking to get a new job and on your resume your job title doesn't match what HR is looking for, that's a problem. How long has it been since you had that job? If it's a longer time, in this case, people have gotten more used to now the fact that people are out of work longer, so 3 months may not be bad. It may be more like 6 months or 9 months. Experience, how does your experience match? Degrees, age, gender, physical experience, all these things, even though there's no discrimination, still factor in. Location. So all of these things are factors that you run into. So what can you do? Well, the thing to do is don't try to worry about the stuff you can't control. Worry about the stuff you can control. So what can you control? You can establish personal objectives. You can do some self-assessment, understand all your transferable skills, all the things you can do. You can research the customer. If this is going on this theme that you're a business, so you can figure out who are your customers that you're going to try to approach to get a job. I went to a seminar once, a conference, and there was a speaker there who worked for an HR consulting company, and she said that her view was her current employer was just her latest client. So that was her idea, was her employer is her current client, which is, sort of that, so it sets the context. The other thing, you focus on your accomplishments. You have accomplished things. You have things that you can succeed at. Keep your knowledge base current. Try to track what's going on in your field and maintain your network. So those are all things that you can control in your career. Additionally, to keep on this accomplishments, one thing we highly recommend is keeping a work history. So IEEE USA has this thing called the Career Manager that I think is online if you can use that. But what you need to do is you have accomplishments. So you need to identify them, look at them. What are the skills involved in the accomplishments? Are they organizing skills? Are they critical thinking skills? So what are the underlying skills? Oh, I write programs. I'm good at writing programs. Well, what does that involve? Analysis, mathematics, whatever kinds of things that involves. Those are your core skills that you can build on. And then after you do this analysis, then you have an idea more what you can do with those skills. Keeping your knowledge base current. Subscribe to, if you're in electronics, subscribe to EE Times online. I'll mail it to you every day. Information overload, but it used to be once a week. Learn to use new tools. Take a course at the community college. Get into a new area, open source, alternative energy, something like that, something that's new, where they can't say, well, there's nobody with 5 years experience. You don't have that threshold, okay? You become known in the open source. If you're a software guy and you do something in the open source community, that's sort of meritocracy. So if you demonstrate that you're a good person, and you'll get a brand, okay? And you can use that. You can say, I volunteered on this project. I haven't been sitting at home watching TV. Hey, I worked on this, I worked on that, I did this, I did that. So that's a good thing to be able to say. So this boils down back to that concept that we had last module about value. Jobs and businesses are about value added. So businesses have to add value to make a profit. If business is not adding value to something, then they're not going to have customers eventually, and they're not going to be in business. So we as EEs or IEEE fields of interest people, IEEE's got 40 of these now, we have to add value. If our employer doesn't see that we're adding value, then when push comes to shove, they'll say, oh, we don't need Fred. He's not adding value. So that goes back somewhat back to your brand. So when you're on your resume, or even when you're doing your elevator pitch, you have to have a value proposition that is clear on the resume. The employer is not going to divine what your value could possibly be by reading through 2 pages of resume. They have to be able to, it has to be clear, because they're not going to spend a lot of time. They'll spend 5, 10, 15, 20 seconds screening through resumes. That's assuming if you send in your resume, okay? Really, the real way to do it is networking and get somebody to deliver. Well, if you get somebody to deliver your resume to the hiring manager or a cover letter, it's got to show your value added in there. So if you do that route, so that's anyway. So here's a quote a while back from a guy at the University of Michigan. So here's further defines what a value added is. So if you can have a concrete, specific example of how to overcome a workplace challenge or some problem, how did you solve a problem when being interviewed, or even if you're doing a networking thing and somebody's asking you, well, what have you done? Okay, and if you're upbeat and you know your skills, that'll make you more successful. So that's our job, is to be able to have specific examples of accomplishments that we gave and know what our skills are. So another thing that comes into this, in addition to these factors, are what do you need? What I would call critical variables. So what are you looking out of your career? Okay, are you looking for a challenge? Are you looking to be satisfied? Are you looking for regular promotions? Are you looking for benefits? Are you looking for job security? Does that exist anymore? Are you looking for an ethical work environment? Do you have this, you're looking for fair, do you want to work for an Enron, or do you want to work for, I don't know, what's the power company? Progress Energy? Are they good? Okay, Progress Energy is good, I'm told. They're not an Enron. So, do you want to work for an Enron? Do you care whether you work for an Enron, or do you want to work for Progress Energy? Or do you have this idea that people should be treated fairly? These are all things that you need to find out. What are your expectations? We talked about this a little bit before. Another thing, what kind of workplace do you want? Do you want to be on a team? You know, do your best work when you're on a team with 2 or 3 other people and you can bounce ideas back and forth? Or do you have to go off in the corner by yourself and study the problem and solve it? Do you want to work from home? Do you want to travel? Whatever. What is it you're looking for in a workplace? So if you're unemployed, you know, you now have this sort of opportunity to craft out what you want your ideal situation to be. And then it goes back to your personal business model, which we went through before. So what is your personal business model? So that's a key part of this. So you've got your, you know, what's your workplace? What kind of business model do you want? You may have a business model, you know, that may not agree with your workplace. Well, then you got to look at that. You know, you want to travel, but I want to have a business model of being in one place. Well, you got to figure that out. So the key thing is know your internal motivation and goals. So what are you looking for? And that'll help you a lot. Additionally, this goes back to the valley of despair. Is you have to have a new attitude. If you focus on jobs are scarce, things are scarce, you know, that's sort of a negative kind of thing, and it's not going to be helpful to you in the long term. You're going to get stuck. So you got what we call the theory of abundance. There are jobs everywhere. I just haven't found the job for me yet. Okay, and it's a little positive thing, but it helps. Also, you're going to have a lot of emotions if you're a guy unemployed. So a friend of mine said that he was doing this for a while, and then he finally got to the point where he realized he had to detach himself from the job. So he was looking for a job, but that wasn't his identity. He was just like, I lost my identity. I got to find another identity by finding this job. He finally figured out, no, that's a job. I'm here. There's a job. And once he sort of got that, he was able to be a little bit more dispassionate about it. And the other thing means, you know, if somebody gives you a no, it's like, oh, no, I'm going to go away, I'm bad. No, it just means, no, I'm not going to get it there. I've got to go somewhere else. So it just means you haven't got it, you haven't found it yet. Keep going. Don't stop. Stop for a few seconds and be sad. But you got to keep going. And so you got to have that attitude. I mean, that's what salespeople do all the time. Successful salespeople get no all the time, and they have to keep pushing ahead. So I'm going to go a little bit into career strategy. Dr. Lindborg is going to have a whole module on this. But diversification, don't get pigeonholed in you only can do one kind of thing, because companies are having, when they have fewer people, more people left are expected to do more things. So be able to have a little bit of diversity. Don't be so diverse that you have no identity, you know. So what that goes back into, but then personally you can have a lot of things you can do, but when you do your resume, we'll get into this, you need to target your resume to the position you're going after. So you don't go after a hardware job and list a bunch of stuff about how you know how to do software, because the guy's going to say, well, is he a hardware guy or is he a software guy? Why is he talking all about software? So if it's a hardware job, you talk all about hardware and you don't really say a lot about software, because they're going to get confused. You know, they're looking for a hardware guy. So you got to do that. Know what skills are in demand. Use your network. Ask around. If people want project managers, well, you can go get a project manager certification, which doesn't mean you know how to project management, but you're been certified, so you've taken the class. Or you volunteer for some project. Volunteer for IEEE. You know, put on an event. That's like a little project. You know, do things. That's what I like about IEEE, is I can be an entrepreneur in IEEE. Okay, because as long as it's not illegal and then unethical or something like that, and it makes sense, you know, I want to put on an event like this. You go to your section and they say, yeah, that sounds good. So then you go off and you put it on, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. But you learn a lot of stuff, and it's safe. You know, your boss isn't going to fire you because you did this event at IEEE and only 3 people showed up instead of a room full of people. Or volunteer for a nonprofit. There's nonprofits all over the place that need help. So there's things that you can do to get experience in some areas, maybe non-technical areas that you think that you need to have for your resume. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to get into, I have my timeline here. Good. We're going to get into this value-added thing. So what we want to do, we're going to do an exercise in a couple of minutes. Oh, this is an exercise. So what we want to do is take a couple of minutes and get into this concept of value-added. So we're going to write 4 phrases. And this is just to get you the idea of doing this. This is not, you can't perfect this in a couple of minutes. You're going to have to go back and do this for practice this. So, for example, you could have value added. You could have 5 different kinds of value added you have. Okay, you may not just have one. Okay, but this is to get the idea of being able to think about it, describe them, so that you can then use that as part of your networking, part of your job search. So first part is your skill base. So what kind of work do you do, or what are your services that you can offer? What kind of industry experience or knowledge do you have? What's your focus? What kind of value can you add to your employer? So you've got skills, you've got some experience, you've got some value, something you can do, you can combine those together and produce some kind of value, and then some hook that indicates that you believe that you can demonstrate results. So maybe you've saved the company $1 million by taking this thing and invented something that saved them money. So let's take how many minutes we got? Let's take 5 minutes and start writing down 4 phrases. And you can't necessarily perfect this at this point in time, but this is just get the idea of being able to do this. So we'll take 5 minutes to do that. Okay, we got about 1 more minute. Okay, everybody got their list? Okay, great. One thing I wanted to point out before we go on is in your in the handout that I mentioned, the package, there are some worksheets or some sample worksheets about skills assessment and what's called motivated skills. There's a report, there's a sample report, and the idea behind this is you look at things you're proficient at, competent, or that you're not proficient at, and that you really like using, you really hate using on a matrix scale, and you can use that to get a guide for what you can do and how you like using those. So if you've got a job where you're using a skill that you're good at, but you really don't enjoy using, but your boss found out that you can do this and he makes you do it all the time, then you're not happy. Okay, so these are good kind of self-assessment things. These are examples for you to look at. Okay, so another part. So in addition to figuring out your value added, figuring out the kinds of things you can do, diversification, value added, and also this concept of thinking of your career as a business. And we went through this just to recap. You've got services and solutions focus, which is tactical, immediate. But what you have to do with that is you have to have a customer list. You're sort of in the retail market, so you've got to work on being able to contact people. You've got to be able to sell things, market things. So that's sort of more of a soft skills kind of requirement because you're in a service business. The other thing is, so if you want to do that, that's what you're going to have to look at if you're going to be in the services and solutions business. So if you want to be a consultant or you want to have your own little business offering some kind of services, another option is. So in order for your career as a business, you've got to run your career like a business. So what do you have to do? You have to invest in yourself. You have to look at continuing education. How are you going to keep up with stuff? You've got to know, as we talked about, what are your services, features, and benefits. That's where these assessment exercises come in and help. You have to figure out what's your profit and loss. How much money do you have to have coming in? How are you going to break even? You have to know your market and your customers. But if you want to find a job, you got to know also what's the market there. Where are the jobs? What's the market? What are the target customers? Who are your customers? So basically, we're not trained to do this, but we have to learn how to sell our product, our business product, which is our services, our skills, to our employers, our potential employers. So with that, now I'm going to go into a little bit about market research. So we've got this idea that we have to find out who the market is and who are our customers. So, so how do we do that? Informational interviewing. Informational interviewing was big in the vogue in the early part of the century, and then it sort of fell out because everybody did it and it got overused and whatever. But it's actually a fairly useful technique for doing market research. So you have to know what you want. That's where we'll get into this elevator pitch kind of thing. So you've got to have an idea, what is it you're looking for, and you need to have a little spiel, okay? And you have to have a plan. And then you have to have, excuse me, then you have to have an idea of what industry, what companies you're going to look at, and then you want to get a list of people who you want to interview. Well, how do you do that? Well, that's where your network comes in. So you have people, you ask them, or you go onto LinkedIn, or however, and you come up with some lists of names of people, and you want to talk. And what you're doing what you're doing here is you're doing market research. You're not trying to find a job. You're trying to find out sort of what's the market for your skills. So what you do is you meet with, ideally situation is you just have coffee or something, you go meet with them. You can do it on the phone, but it's a little bit impersonal. But what you want to do is you want to find out what do they do, what kind of things, what kind of projects do they have, things like that. Do they know of somebody else in some other company in the area you can talk to? So you get an entree to talk to somebody else. So you're researching the market. So you get an idea of what are the companies, what do they do, what kind of skills do they use, what kind of people do they hire, things like that. And then make sure you thank these people. And then when you find out enough information so you think that you've got a viable option, then you're done with your market research. So you researched the market, found out some opportunity that you can take advantage of. So once you get beyond that point, then you can start your job search. Maybe they don't have any openings, but you got to do that. There was a great story in Spectrum last year, and I don't remember, it might have been February issue, about a guy who wanted to get a job, I think as a toy designer in San Francisco. But he wasn't qualified to be a toy designer, whatever. But he found this guy, this engineering manager at the company, and he called the guy up and he asked him, you did an information interview, he asked him about toy design. And every couple of months he'd call up and he'd talk to him, and he did that for like 15 months. But that's what he wanted to do. He really wanted to be a toy designer. And eventually some kind of opening came up, and the guy called him up and said, hey, we got an opening, right? And he got a job, and now he's a toy designer. But it took him persistently 15 months of maintaining this relationship with this person until the opening came up. I thought that was a classic example of persistence, in doing, making the contact. He had other work at the time, so he wasn't just sitting around, waiting for the guy to call. But that was, he had an idea of what he wanted, and he just kept persisting on it. So, key thing you're going to need is an elevator pitch. So you go to a networking event, and somebody says, "So, tell me about yourself." Well, what are you going to say? They're not interested in your life story necessarily. They don't want a recitation of what you did last week on your job, maybe. But so you need to have some objective, something to tell them. So that's what an elevator pitch is. The other thing is, when you go to these networking events or whatever, make up business cards. You can go to Office Max or whatever. You can buy the paper template. You go into Word. You make up, Fred Smith, project manager, electronic systems, whatever you want to put on your business card. Put your email address, your IEEE.org email or whatever you got, and you make up these little business cards. So you put on there like, what do you want to do? So you go to the networking events and you hand out all these business cards. So you make sure it's very easy to do. So that's a key thing. So we're going to do a couple of things here before we go into the break. We're going to talk about an elevator pitch, and we may end up, this would be a good thing to work into the break. So what we want to do is remember the work we did on the value proposition? Or I should say you did on the value proposition? The 4 phrases? Those can become sort of the basis of your elevator speech. So what you would do is, so if somebody comes up and says, tell me about yourself, well, what kind of work do I do? What kind of experience do I have? How do I add value? And how can I demonstrate that I produce results? So these are like four little four facets of your elevator pitch. An elevator pitch is usually 30 to 60 to 90 seconds. It's basically, probably everybody knows this, if you got in an elevator and all of a sudden there's some guy that you wanted to meet or you know, your boss's boss's boss, and you wanted to make sure that they knew you existed, you know, what would you say? You know, so it says, well, you went up the elevator, you know, 30 seconds to the next floor. So anyway, so I don't know, with this size group, it may be a little awkward to try to do the pillar up part, and we're running a little bit on a tight timeline with the webcast, but that might be something you can do at the break. So, so basically, this is in your handout. So you get a, basically you have an elevator pitch, it should be 30 to 60 seconds long, and if you want to do one up, you can go over and find somebody and explore elevator pitches. And these are our resources. So let me see if we have any questions before the break, because we're going to take a, after we get done with the question, we have 5 more minutes, we'll take a 15-minute break, and then Dr. Lindborg will be up here and start talking about career strategy in more detail. So, questions? Any web questions? Yes.
So basically, sorry, I was like when I talked to the resume thing, we want to use keywords and we're trying to key off it to make the impact, such what it's emotion. Bang for your buck and say a certain amount of time. Like say you don't want to be wrong way, you want to say, hey, yes, I'm extremely organized, but you want to use, I guess, colorful words as possible in it, but not too elaborate in some ways.
Right. Excuse me. And the question is, what should you put in your elevator pitch? Should you have keywords? How elaborate should it be? I would say imagine somebody's going to come to you and they're going to give you their elevator pitch. What would you be looking to hear from them? What would be annoying if they started talking about? Okay, so sort of put yourself in the sort of the other aspect of it, because you don't want to come up and have your elevator pitch be something that annoys people, because that's not going to work, right? So you need to figure that out, and it also probably depends on sort of who you're talking to. So you go to a technical event, right, and there's a whole bunch of technical people, then you can throw out some buzzwords and things like that. But if you went to your church group, you know, and you want to tell people that you were looking for a job, you probably need a different kind of elevator pitch, you know, I mean, for that kind of an audience where they're not going to understand all these buzzwords. But you want to give them some idea of what you do and things like that. So I would say you probably need more than one elevator pitch that you can tailor to the kind of audience, you know, that you're going to be networking with. Any other questions? Anything on the web? No web questions? All right, so why don't, oh, there's one in the back.
Because there are so many people unemployed right now, there are technically businesses. What I think of is a lot of times in elevators,
Well, you don't, it's called an elevator pitch, but you don't do it just in an elevator. Okay, so yeah, you're right. Yeah. So don't go into the elevator. Hi, I'm Fred. I'm looking for a job. You know, yeah. But let's say you go to a networking event, or you go to, you know, there's like some incubator event that's having an open house. So you want to go over there and see, gee, do these people. So you need to have some way to, in a concise way, explain who am I, what can I do, what kind of value can I provide? And so you can, meet people. And so that's, the elevators try to show that it's a short thing. Yeah, I mean, you have to make sure it's appropriate, appropriate time, yeah. I mean, people have talked about how, they're in line at the grocery store and they happen to mention something to somebody and they got a job, but you never know. But you don't go running around the street going, hi, you want to hear my elevator pitch? You want to hear my elevator? That's probably a little too obnoxious. So, yes. Oh, I think a lot of people use them. I don't have anything, but if you're going to any kind of, if you don't have one, you probably ought to have one, because if you go to some professional meeting and you meet somebody and you want to give a little concise description of what you do, then you really need to have some kind of an elevator pitch thing. So then it's focused. It's not rambling. Yeah, Diane.
In response to the issue, use the elevator pitch. A lot of times when you're a person, you send your resume out as a job board, you get an offer recruiter, they glance at your resume, and that's kind of the first thing that you can use to start a conversation with them.
Yeah. So the comment is that if you have your resume posted somewhere or you're on LinkedIn and some recruiter contacts you, maybe on the phone, then it's nice to have your elevator pitch because you got a concise little statement that you can tell these people about what you're doing. So it's very useful that way. Yeah, no question.
Also, does that lead into when you go for the job interview as well? Because kind of what I've done, one of the first things they say, well, tell me something about you or what you're looking for, what you bring to my company or this job that you may be looking for, kind of thing.
Right.
And it all falls into place.
Yeah. The question is, so could you use the elevator pitch when you go for an interview? I would say yes. You might want to have some additional information, additional stories or things that you can use, and we'll get into that a little bit when we get the interview module. Yeah, but that's another thing. Somebody says, tell me about yourself. You want to have thought about that and have a crafted answer. You know what I mean? It creates a brand image of you. Yes. There's one in the back.
Job fairs.
Yeah, job fairs. Yes, you can use the elevator pitch at a job fair when you're going around and you're talking to the representatives from the different companies with your resume and things like that. So, okay, we are at time for the break. So we have. Okay, so we're.